This is a reading of Chernobyl, Interviews from Inside a Nuclear Disaster Area by Interviews That Matter from 2013. The Chernobyl disaster was a catastrophic nuclear accident that occurred on April 26, 1986, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine. The disaster was the worst nuclear disaster in history. 31 people died in the accident itself, but the long-term effects of cancer-causing radiation in the area are still being investigated. As you read, find evidence to answer this question. What is the legacy of Chernobyl? That word legacy is what you want to be thinking of as you read through this article. When you leave a legacy on someone or something, you're leaving a major impact, and that can be something positive or negative. So as you're reading this article, think about the major impact that this historical event had on not just the people in Ukraine, but the world. And for your reference, if you don't know where Ukraine is, it is in Europe. Right here, bordering Russia. Okay. So here we go. Pripyat, once a city of more than 40,000 citizens, has become a ghost town. The Chernobyl power plant remains one of the world's most horrible nuclear disasters. A lot of people are intrigued by environments that resemble the end of the Earth, says journalist Bo Levin, who visited the danger zone only 2 years after the explosion. On April 26, 1986, during a routine test, a sudden power surge occurred in Reactor 4 of the Chernobyl power plant in former Soviet Union. Several steam explosions followed, exposing sensitive parts of the reactor to air, a combination which set the reactor on fire. The fire, in turn, sent radioactive fallout into the atmosphere, affecting a large area of modern Ukraine and the rest of Europe. The nuclear blast released 400 times more radioactive material than the bombing of Hiroshima in 1945. It resulted in an unknown number of deaths and malformed humans and animals. The nearby city of Pripyat remains a ghost town. The official death toll by the Soviet Union, to which Ukraine belonged at the time, is a mere 31. However, the extent of the after effects, such as cancer, birth defects, and a number of illnesses due to the exposure to radioactive material, is still disputed. Some 500,000 took part in the work of trying to contain the waste and prevent an even greater disaster. And according to Bo Levin, some research point at the death of thousands. The people who helped were constantly exposed. The city of Pripyat, which is the closest large city to the power plant, is still an unlivable region. Today, there's a so-called forbidden zone of around 30 kilometers surrounding Chernobyl. Bo Levin, journalist and documentary filmmaker, went to Ukraine together with a photographer only 2 years after the blast. The purpose was to cover the aftermath of the event and the attempts of the Soviet government to cover up the extent of it. This is the story of what he saw and how he did it. And I'll refer to Interviews That Matter as ITM from here on out, and Bo Levin will be BL. ITM. You were in Chernobyl when it was still hard to get access. How did you get in? BL. I've been there 3 times. The first time we had help from an environmental organization to get in, and later from critics of the regime to get around. ITM. Can you tell a little bit about what you saw? BL. In the city of Narodozhe, close to the border of Belarus, we met a veterinarian. He'd been one his whole life, and his dad one before him, so he had access to statistics on most occurrences in the last 50 years. He was very concerned with the increased amount of malformed animals. Since the government tried to silence the true extent of the effects, the veterinarian secretly collected malformed animals in large barrels. We could photograph pigs with 2 heads, 2 genitals, malformed eyes, and several calves and a horse with 6 legs. We also went to the ghost city of Pripyat, which used to have 40,000 inhabitants, but today is closed down and deserted. and I've been to a few of the around 400 towns that are extremely contaminated. Many of them had been buried in the ground. ITM. Pigs with two heads? It all sounds shocking. What was your reaction to the sight of the animals? BL. I still have dreams about it. The smell of formalin and the sight of the animals. ITM. Are there still people living in the area? Have you met any? BL. I've met people who refuse to move out of the forbidden zone and live their lives in a highly radioactive environment. I met people like that in Fukushima in Japan as well when I went there to film in 2011. ITM. Why do you think they stay? BL. A lot of elderly people have lived there for generations and have a hard time leaving. Besides, they wouldn't know where to go. A lot of the ones I've met are dead now, especially of those who helped with the decontamination. I've met a lot of people who are feeling very bad, especially psychologically. Cancer in children has increased a lot, according to the World Health Organization, and diseases such as leukemia, heart diseases, and so on continue to grow in extent. ITM. You said you're in Fukushima as well. What was that like compared to Chernobyl? BL. It was like a deja vu experience. Desperate people who fled their villages, closed societies where grass had started to take over streets and squares, and the radiation gauge, which sometimes showed several hundred times more radioactivity than normal. ITM. What does it take to get into Chernobyl today? BL. As the Ukrainian government has discovered that they can make money on Chernobyl, you can hire educated guides and visit the area for 24 hours. You can enter the reactor and visit Pripyat if you're willing to pay up. The guides also know where the radiation is particularly high and can keep tourists out of danger. ITM. Would you call it catastrophe tourism? BL. Well, a lot of people are intrigued by environments that can resemble the end of the earth. It triggers our imagination. At the same time, myths appear surrounding what has happened. In the case of Chernobyl, however, what can be scientifically proved is more than enough. ITM. Do you believe that young people today who might not remember when the accident happened have a correct perception of the incident? BL. No. I've met young people today who have never heard of Chernobyl, despite the fact that the damage of it is still serious. Around 6 million people still live in areas with too high radiation levels. Some animal meat still has too high cesium content.